with Monterey History and Art. And just the 30-second elevator spiel about Monterey History and Art. It was founded in 1931 by a lot of the movers and shakers of the region back in the day, and initially was focused mostly on building preservation. And organizations evolved over the decades, and today the Monterey History and Art includes the Stanton Center and Theater, where we are now, with the wonderful museum next door and this theater. Casa Serrano on Pacific Street, which is a fabulous 1940 adobe shop full of historic art. Open Saturdays and Sundays 2 to 4 at my favorite price, which is free. Also, the Mayo Hayes O'Donnell Library, which is a fabulous research resource for local historians, both amateur as well as professional. And the Dowd House, which is right next door as well. And La Merienda, the yearly celebration. So a little bit about the lecture series. In November, we installed the Chris Shake exhibit upstairs, and a number of us were looking around and saying, boy, between that exhibit and Bounties of the Sea, which was put up by the Italian Heritage Society, we have a lot of waterfront and wharf-centric stuff in the museum. Let's do a lecture series. And so, here we are, and we're, graced to have 6 of our region's best presenters, history presenters, agreed to be part of this. Well, 5, and then me. So our first series was Tim Thomas speaking about the Japanese experience with the abalone fishing, which unfortunately kind of ended with the beginning of World War II and internment. The Italian experience, which started in the 1930s, was picked up by Bob Ania. He gave a great talk on the sardine fishing industry. A couple weeks ago, Cameron Binkley, who's the historian at DLI, gave a fabulous talk about Anton C. Heydrich, a historic photographer who did a lot of military photography and some civilian photography as well. That was followed up by the week link, me talking about Custom House. And today, there's no drop-off in the talent, as we'll get to in a sec. So unfortunately, we had a conflict today between this lecture series and the memorial for Dennis Copeland. And so we're trying to deconflict that as best we can. So Greg is a friend of John Sanders, and he's going to be doing videography today. And so if you see that set up, that's what that's about. So with some delay, those will be made, the videos from both lectures will be made available to folks that are at the memorial. And then there are cards out front, right, that you check in. Condolence cards with a logo on them, they're just blank. And so if anybody wants to say anything to the Copeland family, you can do that, and then we'll get them to them tomorrow. Some housekeeping issues. Greg Henderson will be presenting first today about Lewis Josselyn. We'll have a 10-minute Q&A, more or less, a 10-minute bathroom break. For folks that are not familiar with the complex here, the bathrooms are out this door into the courtyard and then right over here. Just a quick reminder to silence or check and make sure that you silence your electronic devices. I hadn't, but now I have. And so with that, let me introduce Greg. So Greg Henderson is a historian, an author, and a genealogist specializing in the early history of Carmel by the Sea and Monterey County. He has published multiple books and articles on the region's founding families, artists, and photographers. Greg's most recent book is an in-depth study of historic photographer Lewis Josselyn. Greg Henderson.
Good afternoon. Such a beautiful day today. I can't believe it. I walked around and it's just incredible. It's like a March day, right? Thank you, Scott, for inviting me here. This is a special honor for me to be able to so I speak in this mic. Yes. Let me know if you can't hear me.
So it extends also.
Yeah. So this is a great honor for me because I'll just display my book real quick. I did write this book, and I'm really proud of it. And it's this it's an amazing opportunity for me as a researcher.
I don't think his mic's.
Get the mic close, please.
Okay, sorry.
Maybe it's not on.
We need a little setup. Okay, can you hear me now? Yes. All right. All right. So, again, thank you, Scott, for inviting me here. It's a great honor. I want to acknowledge that Trudy Josselyn Salter is here in the audience, and she is the daughter of one of the Lewis's brothers, Windsor Josselyn. And so this is a great opportunity to see her. I just heard that Rachel Josselyn also is here. Is that true? There she is. And and she is the granddaughter of Talbot Josselyn.
We can't hear you because you're not using the mic.
Yes, I'm so sorry. So she is the granddaughter of Talbot Josselyn. So again, these folks have been very good in helping to contribute to photographs that you'll see today in this presentation. A little bit about myself. I was born in Carmel, and I went to Pebble Beach, Robert Louis Stevenson School, which is a great opportunity for anybody that's been there. And we lived on Dolores Street, not too far from the post office. And now we have a house on Carmel Point that we share with other family members. And this photo is very interesting. I went to the Monterey County Historical Society in Salinas and met James Perry, some of you may know, who's the director, and we went through all of the Josselyn photographs. And this particular photograph was not in the albums that were available to me. So James is very good about doing his own research, and he uncovered this photo in a filing cabinet tucked away, probably one of Pat Hathaway's filing cabinets that came over. So, and this is later I found the same photograph in an article at the Monterey Public Library. So, and this is a great biography of Lewis Josselyn if you haven't seen it. So who is Lewis Josselyn? He was Carmel's early commercial photographer. And today we're going to take the journey of his time in San Diego to going to school in Boston and then coming to Carmel. And you'll see some unpublished photographs that you've never seen before because of the research that I've done. And this particular photo was courtesy of Rachel Josselyn Asa. A wonderful picture of Lewis, by the way. Now, his parents were born in Massachusetts, and they came to San Diego later in life. Alice Lamb Josselyn, the mother, was involved in the Red Cross, the Forest Theater, and the Abalone League. The father, Charles Lewis Josselyn, was into real estate, mining, and railroad development. When he died in 1917, he left $120,000 in U.S. Liberty bonds to his children, which was a great advantage, or some people could say a disadvantage, but hopefully it was an advantage. So Lewis was born in 1883 in National City near San Diego. He developed an early interest in art and photography, and his parents sent him to the Eric Page School in Boston in 1990. He was only 17 years old at the time. During that time in Boston, he developed an interest in photography and did a lot of documentation work. And you can see three pictures. The Massachusetts State Building, the Museum of Fine Arts building, and the Boston Church Cemetery. When he returned from Boston to San Diego, he went up north, and one of his assignments was to photograph the Black Butte Summit train collision near Mount Shasta. So this is a wonderful picture. You can see it's very clear and crisp. And this particular, these photographs were published later in a book called Pacific Slope Railroads. So this begins his documentary recognition. In 1904, he started traveling. So he traveled to Salt Lake City, and he did this first photograph of a row of poplars, where he won a prize in a contest. In 1905, he went to Mexico City and did this photograph of Poets Walk, which is in a park in that city. This was published in Burr Macintosh Monthly, giving him national exposure. Here's a picture of the U.S. Navy battleships, the Great White Fleet, done in 1908 in Southern California. And it marks a major international Navy event that he photographed. Okay. Now this is a wonderful picture of the three boys. 1913 photo with brothers Talbert, who was born in 1886 in Massachusetts. Why Massachusetts? Well, even though his parents lived in San Diego, they would go back east because of family members and perhaps business. He became a writer and actor. He wrote 2 novels that were turned into films. Windsor, on the right, the younger guy, was born in 1895 in San Diego, and he developed an interest in writing and acting. Served in World War I, and he was a captain in World War II. Here is a Ancestry.com family tree that I put together. It shows the parents and the 3 boys, Talbert, Windsor. They both had children except for Lewis. They decided not to have any children. He moves to Carmel in 1914, which was a haven at that time for writers and artists. He rented a house on Casanova Street. In Windsor, the younger boy acted in the Carmel Arts and Crafts Hall as soon as he came in 1914. So there's a whole story behind this that I would love to find out more about. So during this year, 1914, when he arrived, Lewis Josselyn begins documenting historic buildings. And this is a photograph of the Colton Hall that was done in 1919. And it shows a very interesting ornamental fountain on the left, which was later removed. Here's a classic 1914 photo of Colton Hall in jail. It was at the site of as many of you know, it was the site of California's first constitutional convention in 1849. Here's the rear view of Colton Hall in jail that is on Dutour Street. And it shows on the left side Vasquez Adobe, when it was only a 1-story building, and the Alvarado Adobe. Here's a close-up view of the Alvarado Adobe, the home of Juan Garista Alvarado, California's first native-born governor. Today it's privately owned and not open to the public. As you can see, very little has changed since the photograph was taken in 1916. Here's a 1924 photo of the House of the Four Winds. Colton Hall is behind it. It's the first hall of records. Imagine Lewis standing on that red tile roof to capture this perspective. His contemporaries, we know that Edgar A. Cohen was living at the time, and he did this wonderful picture of the Carmel bathhouse in 1904, which Lewis also photographed. Another contemporary, Lewis S. Slavin, became friends with Lewis, both named Lewis in a sense, and they exhibited together their photography. And this is a picture of Colton Hall in 1912. In 1879, Robert Louis Stevenson stayed at this French hotel. And here in the top picture is a 1915 rear view of that building. The next one is the 1922 front of the building. And the last photo shows Josselyn experimenting with moonlight photography. So this is done at night. And he registered copyrights for the word moonlight, which is interesting. You'll see another moonlight picture later on. This particular picture appeared in the Oakland Tribune in 1922, giving him a wider audience. Notice the photo credit. Photo by Josselyn. This is the Sherman Rose House, photographed in 1915. It was on Alvarado Street, and apparently a rose was planted by Lieutenant William T. Sherman, and that's why it has the name. The house was moved in 1922 and rebuilt by Percy Gray, the artist. Here's a great photo of the first frame house, photographed in 1915, was on Webster Street. It was the home of Lady Allen. She lived there with her son and family, but it was demolished in 1923. As you can see, it's almost demolished there. So all these photographs you've seen so far are, we're getting ready for a 1916 calendar. So he publicized in the Carmel Pine Cone in 1915 that he wanted to sell a calendar. And he sold them at the Blueberry Tea Room in the Carmel office on Ocean Avenue. And again, we have a 1929 calendar photograph that he did showing the road crew for the road from Monterey to Carmel. Here's a wonderful, it's probably one of my favorites, picture done in that, we'll get to it in a minute. So first of all, in 1915, he joins the Forest Theater. So this is a very important aspect of his life, where he documented sets and actors and productions. And this is a lovely picture of Ruth Custer, the wife of Edward G. Custer, in 1922 with a backdrop of Caesar and Cleopatra. He became the official photographer for the Forest Theater and documented sets and productions. He also had a role in stage lighting, which is interesting. And here's a quote, I'll quote it. This is from Lewis. "Never let lighting detract from the spoken line, nor descend to a trick effect just because it's a good trick. Light is the medium to which a production swims, but you must never forget the production in the medium." Isn't that wonderful? Here's July 1915, he started doing his photographs for the Forest Theater, and this is on the left is the actor in the play Junipero Serra. The one on the right happened the same month, and it was for the Midsummer Night's Dream. And his brothers, Windsor and Talbot, acted in these plays. And these photographs are quite good. They are the actors in the play Treasure Island. You know, Robert Louis Stevenson wrote Treasure Island in 1881, shortly 2 years after he visited Monterey. And some people think that the coastal scenery in the book resembles parts of Monterey, including Spyglass Hill and Point Lobos. Now in 1917, Lewis goes off to war. And this is a lovely picture of him, and you can see on the right, he's a little shorter than the other guys. Apparently from the military records that we could find, he was only 5'6". Not bad. I'm only 5'8", so. So he served in World War I at the age of 34. And this is showing his uniform. He was stationed in France at the base hospital number 34. His photographic duties were for the American Expeditionary Forces. The top picture is the X-ray room at the hospital. And then we see General Pershing visiting the hospital. During this time, he met his future wife, Jeannie Richard. She was a nurse. And they got married in New York City in 1920. They built a house on Santa Rita Street. And he took his war photos and he exhibited them at the 1920 Arts and Crafts exhibition. He also was a member of the American Legion Post number 41. He helped edit and provide photographs for a book that was published in 1922 called Base Hospital 34. Windsor contributed articles as well, showing a collaboration between the two brothers. He returned to Carmel, and he returns to the Forest Theater, and in 1922, he starts working on productions. This is the actor in the play Inchling, which was produced by Ira Remsen. And on the right, we see the 1924 play Mr. Bunt. And Talbot and Windsor are on the left of that picture. And they were involved in set design. Now here's a building that I just saw today for the first time. It's the California's first theater that's on Pacific Street, west of the wharf. And this is a 1920s photo documenting historic buildings. It was built in 1847 by Jack Swan, and only later became a historic landmark in 1934. So Lewis was looking at these buildings and trying to capture them before they were changed. In 1929, he took a photo of this Fremont house at 539 Hartnell Street. It was occupied by General John C. Fremont. In 1846, during the American occupation of California. Here's a 1920s photo of the Custom House near Fisherman's Wharf. It's one of the oldest government buildings in California. This is the Monterey Pioneer Bakery, photographed in 1928. It was owned by Henri Escalay, who was a Carmel City developer. Very interesting guy. And then the next picture is a 1931 photo of Sherman's headquarters, built in 1834 by Thomas Gregory Berkin. Still stands today. Here's a Monterey Peninsula Community Hospital, photographed in 1934. It used to be called the Grace Beer Clinic. It shows Josselyn documenting modern developments, not just adobes. One of his favorite subjects was the Monterey cypress trees. They were widely published in books and magazines, including House and Garden. Here's one of my favorite photos, and everyone I'm sure in this room has seen it, called The Lone Cypress. At Midway Point, which was considered 8 miles from Hotel Del Monte. It's an iconic landmark that's still heavily photographed. Here's the similar photo, 1936. They returned to the same tree, and on this particular photo on the reverse side, it says Stillwater, Midway Point, 17-mile drive, Monterey Peninsula, California. Copyright 1936 by Lewis Josselyn. So it shows his careful documentation of his work. This next picture is the only known photograph or only known painting, oil painting that I could find. It was exhibited at the Monterey County Fair in 1931. And on the reverse of this painting, it says Monterey Cypress, 17-mile drive, California, by Lewis Josselyn, Carmel, California. But he never promoted himself as a painter. Please correct me if I'm wrong about that. Now we're going to shift to disasters. So this is a photograph of the Associated Oil Company's tanks where crude oil was stored. You can see warships in the distance on Monterey Bay. This is the Frank H. Buck oil tanker that ran aground on May 3rd, 1924 at Point Pinos, Pacific Grove. It was a major event, and you can see the bottom picture shows some vintage cars. In September 14th, 1924, lightning struck one of the oil tanks. The fire burned for 2 days. Windsor was a volunteer fireman during this time. They needed help. And this is a quote from him that was in the paper. When the first tank boiled over, it seemed for a minute that the world was at end and that we were in hell. The air was filled with burning oil, and Lighthouse Street was a river of fire. Can you imagine? Now, the Hotel Del Monte fire was a big thing. That happened on the same year, September 27th, 1924. You see Fire Chief William Parker standing in the ruins. These photographs were widely published in local and national newspapers and magazines. And the hotel reopened in 1926. This photo was published 26 years later, June 12, 1915. So its images continued in circulation. Here's the lovely theater of the Golden Bough. So this top picture shows you the theater that's behind what today is the Cottage of the Sweets. Edward G. Custer had the great idea to create an indoor theater on Ocean Avenue in 1924. So in Josselyn, Lewis Josselyn was very much there at the time, photographing the opening and capturing the excitement of Carmel's growing theater scene. But on May 20th, 1935, fire destroyed the building. It moved to Monterey Street. It was rebuilt, and today is known as the Golden Bough Playhouse. Now, we'll get into the Monterey. In 1930, this is a shot of moonrise over Monterey Bay. So this is that moonrise photo I mentioned. It demonstrates Josselyn's exploration of moonlight photography. Here's a 1914 view of Monterey Bay and Harbor from Presidio Hill. Great picture. A 1929 photo of Monterey Bay, Fisherman's Wharf, and the Municipal Wharf from Presidio Hill. Booth Cannery is shown on the right side. Now looking east from Presidio Hill to Fisherman's Wharf, we see the Municipal Wharf again in the background. This photo was done in 1929. Here's a close-up view of the Municipal Wharf. It was completed in 1927, home of wholesale fish companies, the east side of Fisherman's Wharf. This is a 1929 photo of Booth Cannery on the left and Lewis Fish Market on the right, west of Fisherman's Wharf, showing Monterey's fishing and canning industry. In 1920, we see a steamer at Fisherman's Wharf alongside Mateo Napoli Fish Company. Commercial fishing was central to Monterey's economy. Here's a 1919 photo of Pop's Ernest Restaurant, one of the first eating establishments on Monterey's Fisherman's Wharf. And we have up on the right-hand side is a 1932 advertisement for the restaurant. Three images from 1920s showing the working waterfront. The first one shows a fishing game boat near Monterey shoreline. The second shows the east side of Fisherman's Wharf number 1. And the third shows Cannery Pier on the north end of the future Cannery Road. Now we're going to move into the California Mission Series. So he started doing this, doing photographs for the California missions in 1909, but this is a 1929 photograph of the San Carlos Cathedral in Monterey. It shows his interest in historic architecture and religious heritage. On the left, you see the 1909 photograph of Mission San Diego and the San Diego River. The middle picture is the 1915 Los Angeles Plaza Church. And again, on the third is the San Carlos Cathedral that was, of course, built in 1794, founded by Junipero Serra. Here's another view of the San Carlos Cathedral from across Lake Estero. Not too far from here. He liked to photograph the Carmel mission, the restoration, starting in 1919. In the first photo, if you look closely, it shows that the memorial chapel on the left side of the building had not yet been built. Other missions that he photographed were the mission San Francisco and the mission San Antonio. Now, he photographed notable figures like Robertson Jeffers and Joe Mora. And he was a close friend with Joe Mora. And this is a 1927 photo working on the California cart in his Pebble Beach studio. Now, this organization, the Monterey History and Art Association, gave an exhibition in 2003 for Joe Mora. And of course, in this particular document, they're showing back to the drawing board with artist Joe Mora. Lewis shows off his photographs. Some of his major works include the Poppy Nymph, that was photographed by Lewis in 1916. And this was an early major work that was exhibited at the Panama Pacific International Exposition in 1915. Here's the Mora's Dolly Boy sculpture photographed in 1920 showing left to right Windsor Josselyn, Joe Mora, Alice Josselyn, the mother, and Jeannie Josselyn, his wife. So these are close connections among the Moras and the Josselyn family. A lot of the Josselyn's photographs appear in publications like Joe Mora, Artist and Writer, done in 1998, and Peter Hiller's The Life and Times of Joe Mora, published in 2021. The first photograph here shows Father Mistress and Joe Mora with the unfinished sarcophagus at the workshop on the grounds of the Carmel. So they created a special building to create this sculpture. And this was done in 1922. The completed sarcophagus was inside the Mora Chapel at Carmel Mission. Now, this particular photograph was published in the Oakland Tribune in 1922. However, it gave no credit to Josselyn. The book by Daisy Bostek, Carmel at Work and Play, was published in 1925. And in this book, there's many photographs by Lewis. Shows a broad circulation of his work. In 1929, my grandfather, Byington Ford, commissioned Mora to create 3 statues of their 3 daughters. So the first photograph on the left shows Mora working on a clay model of the Spanish dancer. And on the right, in that corner there, you see my mother. The second one shows a clay model of my aunt, showing a connection between the Fords and the Mora and the Josselyn folks. Here is how Josselyn and Mora worked together on the Portola Expedition diorama in 1939 at Mora's workshop. These were unpainted sections of the small-scale Spanish soldiers on horseback, exhibited at the Golden Gate International Exposition in 1940. In 1943, he started to photograph the Carmel Dairy murals. And these were animals dressed as humans. This was commissioned by Earl Graft. In the later years, Lester Roundtree, botanist, worked with Josselyn on photographs for the National Horticultural Magazine and Sunset Magazine. He also worked with Frederick Bechtold, and his photographs were published in the Saturday Evening Post, which gave him national circulation. Here's an example of the 1930 Sunset Magazine article with Lewis Josselyn's photographs. Now, he would emboss his print copyright mark on the front right-hand corner of some of the photographs, not all. And on the ink, he used an ink stamp on the reverse side, showing his name and Carmel. And when Pat Hathaway took over the collection, he had his own ink stamp. So this was important for authentication. The final chapter, let's talk about his death and legacy, preservation of his work. On March 14th, 1964, Lewis died at home at age 80. In 1970, his wife Jeannie donated the glass plate negatives to Pat Hathaway. And this sketch is by Joe Moore in honor of Lewis Josselyn. In 1965, his sister-in-law Florence Josselyn gave him a 50-year retrospective at Casa Serrano. And in 1973, she did another 200 photo exhibition at the Sunset Center. Pat Hathaway did his own photographic exhibitions in 1973 and 1981. The Harrison Memorial Library contains 358 images that Lewis Josselyn did, and these are online, available for anybody to look at. They're on California Revealed and Internet Archive. Wonderful pictures. The Monterey County Historical Society has the majority of them, of course, over 1,337 images. And this organization, the Monterey History and Art Association, has a searchable online collection. Lewis, I think, is notable because he preserved visual records before major changes. His archive continues to inform historians and the general public. Here's a great example of his work of the Bixby Creek Bridge in Big Sur in 1932. Here's one of my favorite landscapes showing Carmel Beach, Point Lobos, and it is from the Carmel Pine Cone. This quote: "His camera has caught Carmel's beauty spots. His brush has painted them." Forest Theater's official photographer. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions. So, can I Can we bring the house lights up for the Q&A? Susan, Kathy? Questions? We also have two of the bugs from his ancestry here too. Good, we got one.
Josselyn Canyon Road in Monterey.
Yes,
named
that's-
after.
I don't know. I don't think so, but it's possible. If anybody knows, let me know. But all the research I show doesn't conclude that.
I live on Jocelyn Canyon Road and I have for 45 years. So I bought photographs from Pat when he was on Pacific Street, and consequently he told me no. It was not Lewis Josselyn. It was actually a Navy, not a pirate, but a trader, a ship captain named Josselyn.
Any further questions?
Greg, I was wondering if you could talk a little more to the type of camera equipment that Lewis used and how he hauled it around to do his work.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I know he used the old format cameras, and when Pat Hathaway took it over, he had a hard time trying to print them because of the large scale of negatives. And so he had to find an old negative developer that would actually be able to print them. But that's something that is not well documented, so if anybody has that information, let me know. In fact, when I went to the Monterey County Historical Society, they didn't have any information either.
I do have one of his cameras at my house.
Wow, there you go. Can you take a picture of it and send it to me?
Okay, it's the type that the front of the case falls down and then you're supposed to be able to pull the camera
Yeah,
out of the
okay.
case.
Right.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to still do that,
Okay.
but I'll do my best. And
Well, it would be good just for the documentation part because did it use, what kind of negative? Did it use glass plate or film negative? You probably don't know. Yeah.
not off the top of my head, I don't want to say anything that's wrong.
Well, thank you for that question.
I'm just curious, how did that transition in ownership
Okay, well,
to Pat Hathaway?
Yeah, there's a story behind that. Apparently, his wife, Jeannie, who was French, of course, she couldn't find a home for these large-scale negatives. Carmel Library, the Harrison Memorial Library didn't want to take them, didn't have the room. This was a huge, huge collection of photographs, over 1,000. Some people say 3,000. And they didn't want them. And she had a very hard time getting rid of things. As you probably know, a lot of people have junk in their house. They don't know how to get rid of it. Of course, it's not junk, but she probably didn't know what to do with it. So she finally ran across Pat Hathaway, and they did the transaction. And this was done in 1970, so it was about 6 years after his death.
I can show, I think. You had one photo of the Great White, you had one photograph of the Great White
Yeah.
Fleet. I think that came to Monterey Bay, didn't it?
It may have, because it came along the coast and started in Southern California, where apparently the picture was taken, and it may have moved up north.
1919.
It came north.
Can you talk about
1908
this?
for the Great White Fleet, by the way. 1919 was the Pacific Fleet.
Okay.
Can you talk about his personality? He seems very serious.
Well, that would be something that I might defer to Rachel or Trudy. But from what I understand, he was, a normal type of guy. Didn't have any weird personality things. Anybody want to make a comment?
I'm Trudy Josselyn Salter, Uncle Lewis Josselyn. So I did meet him many times, talked to him. He could be jovial, He really enjoyed the county fair, being at the Legion, the World War I Legion group would put on, I think, be in charge of carts, a little donkey in the front type of thing. So he enjoyed being at that all the time. When discussing his photographs and pictures, paintings, he would get into his professional mode, shall we say. I don't really remember any, his sense of humor, but he did have the two sides of the professionalism, and then you had this, he just got very happy being with his fellow friends out at the county fair. That was the last time I saw him.
Okay, great.
Well, I'm not sure that this speaks so much to his personality, but he did love to collect things on the battlefields during the First World War in France. And
How do you know this?
because I have them.
Oh. So you have some of Josselyn's things that he collected.
On battlefields, yes.
Okay.
So,
Great.
he also did love to paint. I have, and I believe Trudy has a large number of his oils, and I have some as well.
Oh, good. Now this is something I would love to get more information on, so I'll reach out to you on that. Any more questions?
More comment than anything. We have a rather large collection of photographs of Joe Moore in different time periods of his life, his family. Also, this collection was more ephemera and such. And one is a postcard size, vertical, hand colored. You showed the image of one with the anthropomorphic rabbit with the camera set up. Well, that's hand drawn on the front of the card.
Right.
And it's an invite over to Bergdorf's, Ferdinand Bergdorf, so very close friend and neighbor of Joe Morris. And on the back, everybody that attended signed in. The occasion was the Joe Morris' older brother, Francis Louis Moore, was visiting, and so they're for a party for a reception. And I counted, his time, the who's who, all the Moore family was there, and so many others, but I counted, Lewis Josselyn was there, his wife, and probably I think 3 others from the Josselyn family signed in. So that was kind of interesting.
Very
It's
nice.
nice to see what you had there.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, super. So let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll, rendezvous and start promptly. I'll mention that both of our speakers today have books for sale, and so Greg will be in the atrium during the break as well as after both talks are done. I think, John, you may have some setup work to do with your computer, but if John gets a free minute, he'll be out there also, and then they'll both be out there at 3 p.m.